It started like any normal Saturday. The sun was out, the air was quiet, and our little street looked peaceful. But by the end of the day, my daughter was in the hospital. She had been shot, twice. Both bullets hit her legs. The woman who did it lives just a few houses down. She's part of our HOA. People around here call her Karen. I never liked that term, but after what she did, I understand why they use it. My daughter, Emma, is 17. She's disabled. She uses a wheelchair and has for most of her life. She's sweet, thoughtful, and never causes trouble. She likes to paint, bake cookies, and smile at neighbors passing by. That's just who she is. She's never said a bad word to anyone. But that didn't matter to Karen. Not one bit. For months, Karen made little comments. It started with quiet complaints. A note on the door. A loud sigh when Emma rolled down the sidewalk. She once even said my daughter's ramp made the neighborhood look cheap. I ignored it. I didn't want drama. I had more important things to focus on, like Emma's health. I kept my head down, paid my HOA dues, and let Karen have her little power trips. But that wasn't enough for her. Something in her eyes always felt off. Like she thought she ran the block. She acted like our street was her kingdom and the HOA gave her a crown. She would patrol the sidewalks, pointing out tiny things she didn't like. Trash cans left out too long. Grass that grew a little high. Porch lights that stayed on past 10. But when it came to my daughter, it was different. It wasn't just rules anymore. It felt personal. And then, the day everything changed. Emma was outside, drawing in her sketchpad. It was warm. She loves the sun on her face. Karen walked over, shouting something about her being on the sidewalk. I heard her from the kitchen. The tone in her voice was sharp, angry. I went to the window. I saw Karen standing over Emma, her hands moving wildly. And then, out of nowhere, she reached into her bag. What she pulled out froze me in place. A gun. I ran. Fast. But I wasn't fast enough. 2 shots. Loud, cracking, violent. I'll never forget Emma's scream. The sound of her pain. Her blood on the pavement. Her hands clutching her legs. I held her as she cried, yelling for help, while Karen stood there like nothing had happened. Like she had just swatted a fly. The sirens came quick. Neighbors came out screaming. Phones were out, cameras recording. But Karen didn't flinch. She looked calm, confident, even. Like she thought she was still in control. She had no idea who I was. And she definitely didn't see what was coming next. We moved into that neighborhood about 5 years ago. It was quiet, clean, and mostly full of retired folks or young families. The kind of place where people wave at each other in the mornings and keep their lawns neat out of habit. It felt safe. Safe enough for Emma to play in the front yard or roll down the sidewalks without worry. That's why we picked it. We thought it would be good for her. The HOA had rules, of course. Pages and pages of them. What color your mailbox had to be. How many inches your grass could grow. Even what type of flowers you were allowed to plant in the front yard. Most of it seemed ridiculous, but we followed the rules. We didn't want trouble. I kept to myself. Not because I was unfriendly, I just value peace. I've spent years in rooms full of shouting lawyers and angry people. At home, I like silence. I work a lot, but I make time for Emma. I'm a single parent, so it's always been just the 2 of us. We have our routines. Breakfast together. Evening walks. Story time before bed. We like it that way. I never told anyone on the block what I did for a living. Not because I'm hiding anything, it just never came up. If someone asked, I'd say, I work in law. And leave it at that. People assumed I was an office guy or maybe some local attorney. I let them think whatever they wanted. I didn't need to prove anything. Emma was the real reason we stayed in that neighborhood. She felt comfortable there. She made a little garden next to the ramp we installed. She drew chalk art on the driveway. Sometimes, I'd look outside and see her racing herself in circles just for fun. She liked the freedom, and after all she's been through medically, she deserved it. But even in the calmest waters, there's always something lurking underneath. That something was Karen. Karen lived 2 houses down. She wore her authority like a badge. Not an official badge, of course, but she acted like she had one. She'd walk around with a clipboard during the day, pretending to do inspections. She sent out long, angry emails about trash bins and leaf blowers. Most of us just ignored her. It was easier that way. But Karen didn't ignore us. She started by complaining about the ramp. She said it didn't fit the aesthetic of the neighborhood. I explained it was medically necessary. She didn't care. Then came the noise complaints. Emma laughing too loud. Emma's wheelchair rolling too fast on the pavement. One time, Karen told me Emma's presence was unsettling. I asked her to explain what she meant, but she just smiled and said, "You know what I mean." I did know. And I didn't like it. Emma started to feel it too. She stopped going outside as much. She told me Karen would stare at her, even follow her with her eyes from across the street. Emma said it felt like she was being watched. At first, I tried to tell her it was just in her head. But then I saw it myself. Karen didn't hide it. She'd stand by her window, arms crossed, glaring as Emma wheeled by. If Emma dropped something, Karen wouldn't help. If we had guests over, Karen would make a point of coming outside to check on things. It was like she wanted us to feel unwelcome. Like she thought we didn't belong. I documented everything. Every complaint, every note, every comment. I never raised my voice. Never argued back. I just kept records. That's how I was trained. Let people hang themselves with their own words. Patience is powerful when you know what you're doing. I watched Karen get bolder. She started talking louder, acting more aggressive. She once blocked our driveway with her car and claimed it was an accident. Another time, she came to our door and demanded we remove the flower pots Emma had decorated. She said they were too colorful. I didn't even respond. I just closed the door. I saw it building. I felt it coming. I just didn't know how far she'd go. Karen wasn't just annoying, she was obsessed. Every week, there was something new. A letter in the mailbox about the ramp. A sticky note on our door about Emma's wheelchair, marking the sidewalk. Once, she even called animal control on us because she claimed Emma's service dog barked too much. He doesn't bark. He's trained. But that didn't matter to Karen. Nothing did. She treated the HOA rules like they were sacred law. But even worse, she twisted them. Used them however she wanted. She had no real authority, but people were scared of her. I could see it in how the neighbors acted. They avoided eye contact when she passed by. They nodded and smiled too much. They didn't agree with her, but they didn't want to be her next target either. I didn't blame them. She was relentless. And she had that fake politeness. The kind where she'd smile at you, but her eyes stayed cold. The kind where every "have a nice day" felt like a threat. It wasn't just about power, it was personal. She didn't like Emma. That much was clear. And she didn't like seeing a girl in a wheelchair being happy. That's what really got to her. The incident that pushed things over the edge started small, like it always did. Emma had drawn little chalk butterflies on the sidewalk. She loves butterflies. She drew them in bright colors, added little hearts, and wrote, "Have a great day," at the end. It made me smile when I saw it. It made our neighbors smile too. Karen, not so much. She showed up at our door the next morning, arms crossed, face red. She didn't even knock, she banged. "Your daughter's graffiti is a violation," she snapped. I opened the door slowly. "It's chalk, Karen." "It's still vandalism," she said. "This is a public path, and it looks like a preschool." I said nothing, just stared at her. She didn't like that. "I'm reporting this to the HOA board," she added. I nodded. "Go ahead." That seemed to throw her off. She stormed off, muttering under her breath. I watched her walk back to her house like she was gearing up for war. And in a way she was. Over the next few days, Karen escalated. She stood at the edge of our property, watching. She took pictures of Emma when she was outside. She called code enforcement over a fake complaint. Nothing stuck. But she kept pushing. Then came the day that changed everything. Emma was outside drawing again. This time, she was painting on a small canvas, using watercolors. I was inside reading. I glanced out the window and saw Karen walking toward her. Her steps were fast. Angry. Emma didn't see her at first. She was focused on her art. But I could tell something was wrong. I got up. My heart was already racing. Karen was shouting now. I couldn't hear the words, but I could hear the tone. Sharp. Threatening. I opened the door and stepped outside. That's when I saw Karen reach into her large tote bag. My stomach dropped. It happened fast. She pulled out a gun. Pointed it straight at my daughter. For a second, I froze. My mind couldn't catch up. Who brings a gun to yell at a teenager over chalk? Then, 2 shots. Loud. Emma screamed. I ran. Everything else was a blur. I remember the blood. The way her body twisted as she fell out of her chair. The look in her eyes. Pure terror. I held her in my arms, shouting for someone to call 911. The neighbors were screaming now. Doors flew open. People ran outside. Karen just stood there. The gun still in her hand. No panic. No regret. Like she thought she had every right to do what she did. I looked up at her, holding my bleeding daughter, and all I saw in her face was disgust. Not fear. Not shock. Just pure, twisted hate. And that's when I knew. She didn't snap. She didn't lose control. This wasn't a moment of madness. This was planned. She had thought about it. She had imagined this. She had wanted it. The ambulance came in under 5 minutes, but those 5 minutes felt like forever. Emma was pale, shaking, barely conscious. I was on my knees in the driveway, pressing my hands against her legs, trying to stop the bleeding. I kept whispering, "Stay with me," even though I wasn't sure if she could hear me. My clothes were soaked in her blood. I couldn't even feel the weight of Karen's stare anymore. Everything around me disappeared, except Emma. The paramedics moved fast. They didn't ask questions, just loaded her up and sped off. I rode with them. Sirens blaring, streets flashing by. Every bump on the road made her cry out in pain. I held her hand the whole way. I didn't cry. Not yet. I couldn't. At the hospital, they rushed her into surgery. The bullets had torn through soft tissue and shattered bone. The doctors didn't promise anything. They just said they'd do their best. I sat alone in that cold waiting room, hands shaking, mind racing. For the first time in years, I felt helpless. But not powerless. Back at the house, the police had already swarmed the neighborhood. Karen was still there when they arrived. Still standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed, like she was the victim. She didn't even try to run. She didn't even pretend to be sorry. According to the officers, her only words were, "She provoked me." The girl in the wheelchair. Drawing butterflies. The officers put her in cuffs, finally. She didn't protest. Didn't scream. Didn't cry. Just looked around like she was confused about why everyone was so upset. I wasn't there to see it, but a neighbor told me later, she looked proud. Like she believed she'd be out by morning. Because Karen believed in her own lies. That she was untouchable. That her HOA position gave her power. That the rules she created were law. She had no idea who she was messing with. When I finally got home later that night, Emma was out of surgery. She'd live. But the damage was serious. The doctors said there was a chance she might not walk again. Her progress, years of therapy, set back in an instant. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by her bed, watching her chest rise and fall. Every time she stirred, I held her hand and told her she was safe. That it was over. But I knew it wasn't over. Karen's mugshot hit the local news. The story was short and clean. Local HOA woman arrested for shooting disabled teen. They didn't mention the months of harassment. The hate. The way she stalked my daughter for no reason other than she didn't fit Karen's perfect picture of a neighborhood. That's when I made some calls. I wasn't just some quiet guy who kept to himself. I was a federal judge. One with connections. One who had seen criminals like Karen before, entitled, dangerous, and convinced they were above the law. I wasn't going to handle this like a grieving parent. I was going to handle it like a judge. The prosecutor was an old colleague. I explained everything. Not just the shooting, but the history. The notes. The threats. The pattern. I handed over documentation, videos from neighbors, timestamps, emails. All of it. We didn't charge Karen with just assault. We charged her with attempted murder. With a hate crime. With the use of a firearm during a violent felony. Each charge stacked on top of the other. Each one backed by hard evidence. And every single one pointed to the same truth. This wasn't an accident. This was a deliberate act of cruelty, of hate, of control. The courtroom wasn't ready for what was coming. Karen still thought she was going to walk away. Thought maybe she'd get probation. Community service. She thought she could charm her way out of it. She didn't know who I was. She didn't know who she had tried to destroy. But she was about to find out. The first time Karen saw me in the courtroom, her face dropped. She didn't recognize me right away, not out of the suit, not without the robe. But when my name was read aloud and I walked into that space, the shift in her expression was impossible to miss. Her eyes widened. Her lips twitched. She leaned toward her lawyer and whispered something, probably asking if it was the same person. It was. I didn't speak to her. I didn't have to. My presence was enough. She finally realized this wasn't going to be some small-town slap on the wrist. This wasn't going to disappear under a pile of paperwork or get lost in, she said. This was serious. And I was watching. The judge on the case was a good man. I'd worked with him before. Fair, sharp, no nonsense. He made it clear from the beginning that Karen's status in the community, her involvement in the HOA, and her version of events wouldn't shield her. The facts would. And the facts weren't in her favor. The prosecutors laid it all out. First, the history. Months of reports, complaints, and neighbor testimonies. They showed the pattern, the harassment, the notes, the bogus accusations. Then came the footage. Home security cameras caught bits and pieces over the months. Karen circling our house. Karen pointing and yelling at Emma. Karen taking pictures of Emma's service dog. Then came the day of the shooting. A neighbor had been recording with her phone from across the street, thinking Karen was just being her usual difficult self. She caught the whole thing. The yelling. The gun. The shots. The blood. The courtroom went still as the video played. Some people looked away. Others cried. Karen sat frozen, her hands clenched in her lap. When the video ended, the prosecution rested. Karen's defense didn't have much. They claimed she felt threatened. That Emma's behavior seemed suspicious. That the drawings and decorations made her feel unsafe. They tried to paint my daughter as a public disturbance. But no one believed it. Not the jury. Not the judge. And not me. I didn't take the stand. I couldn't, legally. But I stayed in that room every single day. Front row. Silent. Watching. Letting her feel the weight of what she had done. Emma watched too. From a wheelchair. Her legs still bandaged. Her smile gone. She was brave just showing up. She asked to be there. She said she wanted Karen to see her. To remember her. To know she survived. It took the jury 2 hours to decide. Guilty on all counts. Karen didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't even flinch. But the look in her eyes said it all. She couldn't believe it. She had lived her whole life thinking she was in charge. That she could twist rules to get her way. That people like her didn't face consequences. Now she was facing up to 40 years. The sentence wasn't immediate, but the cuffs were. She was led out of the courtroom in silence. No applause. No celebration. Just a heavy, deep quiet. Like the neighborhood had finally exhaled. Outside, reporters waited. Cameras flashed. I said nothing to them. Just walked Emma to the car, holding her hand the whole way. She was tired. She had been through more than any child should. But as we drove away, she finally smiled, just a little. It was the first real smile I'd seen from her in weeks. I didn't smile back. Not yet. Not until I knew she was going to be okay. Karen was gone. But the damage she caused? That would take longer to fix. Rebuilding didn't start with bricks or repairs. It started with silence. The neighborhood felt different after the trial. Not just quieter, but watchful, cautious. People who used to look away when Karen caused trouble now looked us in the eyes. Some offered a wave, others a soft, "I'm sorry," as we passed. A few brought meals, flowers, cards for Emma. Things they probably wanted to do before but were too afraid to. I didn't blame them. Fear makes people small. But after what happened, they couldn't hide anymore. Emma's recovery was slow. Every day was a test of patience, for both of us. She hated the hospital bed in our living room. Hated the exercises, the pain, the reminders. There were nights she cried quietly, trying not to wake me, but I always heard. I'd sit by her side, holding her hand until she fell asleep again. She'd ask me questions sometimes. Not about her legs or the therapy, but about Karen. Do you think she meant to hurt me? I never lied. I told her, yes. And that was hard, because kids want the world to make sense. They want to believe bad things happen for a reason. But there was no reason here. Just hate. A quiet, simmering hate that had built up over time and exploded in one horrible act. The ramp that Karen had complained about? We kept it. We added flowers to it, bright ones, just like Emma liked. She painted butterflies again, on canvases this time. She still couldn't draw on the sidewalk, but she said the butterflies made her feel free. Like she could still choose joy, even after everything. I went back to work eventually. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Life moves forward, whether you're ready or not. But something inside me had changed. I didn't see cases the same way anymore. I didn't just see files or testimonies. I saw faces. Families. Pain. Fear. I understood victims better now, because I had been one. One afternoon, months later, we got a letter from the HOA. A formal apology, signed by every remaining member. Most of them had voted to remove Karen before the shooting, but they hadn't acted fast enough. They knew it. And now they were trying to make it right. They even offered to pay for part of Emma's medical bills, though we declined. Money couldn't undo what happened. What we needed wasn't a refund, it was accountability. Still, I appreciated the gesture. For once, they were listening. Emma eventually asked to go outside again. Not far, just the front yard. She wanted to feel the sun on her face. I carried her down the ramp, set up her chair, and sat with her. We didn't talk much. We just watched the wind blow through the trees. I could see in her eyes she was still scared, still remembering. But she was also trying. That day, a group of kids passed by on their bikes. They waved to her, smiling, casual. One of them even stopped and asked if she wanted to come paint with them sometime. Emma hesitated, then nodded. It was small, but it meant everything. Later that evening, as we were heading back inside, I looked across the street at Karen's old house. It had been empty since her arrest. A "for sale" sign sat in the yard, slightly tilted. No one had touched it in months. The grass was long. The windows dark. For a place that once seemed so loud, it was now completely still. I didn't feel anger anymore. Just a deep, settled understanding. Some people spend their lives building walls around themselves. Policing others, enforcing control, masking insecurity with cruelty. And sometimes, those walls collapse, and everyone sees the truth. Emma wheeled herself to the front door, then looked back over her shoulder. "Can we plant more flowers?" I smiled. "As many as you want." And just like that, we stepped back into life. Spring came early that year. The air was warmer, the skies clearer, and for the first time in months, the world felt a little lighter. Emma was starting to regain her spirit. Her laughter came easier, even if her movements were still slow. The doctors were impressed with her progress, though they always reminded us not to expect miracles. We didn't. We weren't chasing what used to be, we were learning how to live with what was. The house, once filled with tension, now felt calm. Peace doesn't return in an instant. It trickles in. One morning you wake up and realize the nightmares are fewer. The doorbell doesn't make your heart race. The sound of kids playing outside feels normal again. Not like a threat. Not like a countdown to something breaking. Emma had started physical therapy in a specialized clinic downtown. It wasn't easy. She'd come home exhausted, sore, sometimes frustrated. But every day she kept going. I could see a new kind of strength forming in her, one that didn't depend on walking. One that came from knowing she survived something no child ever should. One afternoon, we drove through the neighborhood and passed a community park. Emma stared at it for a while, then asked if we could stop. We hadn't been back to that park since before the shooting. It held memories, some good, some painful. I pulled in slowly and parked under the same tree we used to sit beneath. She looked around. Nothing had changed. The swings were still there. The slide. The bench where she once painted with her friends. But something in the air felt new. Like the weight that once clung to this place had lifted. We sat in silence for a long time. Then she spoke. "I want to start a group." "A group?" I asked. "For kids like me. Kids who got hurt but still want to be heard. We could paint, write, talk, just be." It hit me how far she'd come, not just physically, but emotionally. She wasn't just healing. She was rebuilding. Reaching outward. Wanting to turn her pain into purpose. I told her it was a great idea. And that I'd help in any way I could. Word spread faster than I expected. Within a few weeks, a local community center offered her a space once a month. Volunteers came forward, teachers, counselors, even a few artists. Parents reached out too. Some had children in wheelchairs. Some had children who had survived violence. All of them were looking for connection. And Emma had created a place for it. At the first gathering, I sat in the back and watched her lead. Nervous at first, she introduced herself, explained why she started the group, and opened the floor for others to share. What followed was something beautiful. Kids who barely spoke in public began telling their stories. They showed drawings, poems, even scars. No one judged. No one interrupted. They just listened. That night, Emma came home tired, but glowing. "I didn't know people would care," she said softly. "They care," I told her. "Because you gave them permission to." Meanwhile, Karen's name disappeared from neighborhood gossip. Her house finally sold, quietly, with no announcement. The new owners were a retired couple with a golden retriever and a garden obsession. They didn't ask questions. They just planted roses where Karen's fake HOA violation signs used to be. The irony wasn't lost on me. Life didn't go back to what it was before. It never does. But it kept moving, and we moved with it. One evening, we hosted a small gathering at our home, something Emma suggested. A thank you to those who stood by us. Neighbors. Therapists. Friends. She wheeled through the crowd like it was the most natural thing in the world, laughing, chatting, welcoming people like a true host. I stood on the porch, watching her, trying not to get emotional. She was still the same girl. But stronger. Wiser. More determined. The kind of strength people don't see coming. The kind that can't be taken away, even by someone like Karen. The night of the storm came without warning. One of those sudden spring downpours that turns the sky black and drowns the streets in minutes. The wind howled through the trees, slamming branches against windows. Power flickered, then disappeared altogether. I lit candles and grabbed the emergency lantern from the hallway closet. Emma, calm as ever, just looked up from her book and said, "Guess we're going old school tonight." We sat together in the living room, listening to the storm. Thunder rolled in the distance. Rain pounded the roof like 1,000 footsteps. But inside, it felt warm. Safe. The kind of safety you don't notice until you remember how much danger once lived in that same space. Emma asked for her sketchpad. Even in the dim glow of candlelight, she wanted to draw. I handed it to her and watched as her pencil moved. Slow, steady, almost rhythmic. She was sketching the garden. The ramp. The butterflies. She'd drawn them so many times now, it was like muscle memory. Then she paused. She stared at the page for a moment, then looked up at me. "Do you think she thinks about us?" It was the first time she'd brought up Karen in weeks. I didn't answer right away. I didn't want to say the wrong thing. I knew Emma wasn't asking out of fear or anger. She just wanted to understand. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe. Maybe not." She nodded, accepting the answer. "Do you think she regrets it?" Another hard question. And again, I gave her the truth. People like Karen, they don't always feel regret the way we do. But that doesn't matter. What matters is what we do with what happened. What you've done. That's what lasts. Emma smiled faintly and went back to drawing. And in that quiet moment, I realized she wasn't haunted by the past anymore. She was just trying to make peace with it. When the storm finally eased up, I stepped outside to check the damage. Branches were scattered across the yard. One of the butterfly signs had been knocked over. I bent down to pick it up and saw that it had cracked in half. I brought it inside, set it on the table, and Emma looked at it like it was a broken wing. "We'll fix it," she said. "Stronger this time." And we did. Together. The next morning, the sun came out bright and unforgiving, casting a golden light on everything the storm had touched. Neighbors were already outside, cleaning up. Someone offered us a hand with the debris. Another came by with coffee. It struck me how far we'd all come. Months ago, no one would have knocked on our door. Now they didn't hesitate. Emma joined me in the yard later that day. She insisted on helping, even if it was just handing me tools. At one point, she asked if she could try standing with her walker. She hadn't done it outside before. The ground was uneven, and she was nervous. But she wanted to try. I held her hand as she pulled herself up, slowly, carefully, inch by inch. Her legs trembled, but she didn't fall. She stood tall for a few seconds, just enough for the wind to catch her hair and for her to feel the ground under her feet again. Then she sat back down and looked up at me. "That felt good," she said. "Like I still can." Later that evening, she asked if we could repaint the broken butterfly sign. She wanted to change the colors. Brighter, bolder. She said they should be unapologetic. I didn't argue. We set up in the garage, spread out the paints, and started from scratch. The new sign wasn't perfect. The lines weren't straight. The colors bled a little. But when we planted it back into the ground the next day, it looked exactly right. Emma stood beside it with her walker, smiling. "Better than before," she whispered. And I believed her. Because sometimes healing doesn't mean forgetting. Sometimes it means honoring the cracks and building something braver in their place.